There is a moment, one specific moment, that happens very close to the end of Black Myth Wukong. You have spent dozens of hours fighting through mountains and spiderwebs and rivers of fire, collecting pieces of a shattered legend, carrying them like offerings toward something you have been told is a resurrection. You believe you are bringing someone back. You believe the journey has always been about him. And then an old monkey sitting in a boat on a still black river looks at you and says something that should not be possible. He says, "You are him, not his heir, not his student, not a copy, not a clone, not a disciple who learned his moves." The old monkey says, with the quiet certainty of someone who has known this for the entire journey and simply waited for the right moment, that the mind of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, the great sage equal to heaven, is you, has been you, was you from the very first step. And everything you thought you were doing, collecting pieces of someone else, turns out to have been the long, winding process of becoming yourself. I have been sitting with this story for a long time. Tonight I want to walk you through all of it. Not just the final reveal, but every thread that leads there. The ancient battle at the beginning of the game that is not quite what it looks like. The 5 broken relics, and the one that was never missing at all. The old monkey on that boat, and why his silence for the entire journey was its own kind of answer. And the 2 doors at the end, one that leads back into the cage, and one that has never been opened before. Come with me. Let your breathing settle. This one goes all the way back. Every story has a before. And the before of Black Myth Wukong stretches back through centuries into one of the most beloved works of literature ever written in Chinese, the 16th century novel Journey to the West, attributed to the author Wu Cheng'en. Journey to the West tells the story of Sun Wukong from the very beginning. He was born from a stone on a mountain called Huaguo, Mount Flower Fruit, a stone that had absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth for untold ages, until one day it simply cracked open and released a monkey. He had no parents, no lineage, no celestial origin. He was something that had never been categorized before, a living creature made of the raw material of the world itself, entirely free of any obligation to any existing hierarchy. He found immortality through sheer persistence and resourcefulness. He trained under an immortal sage who gave him his name, Sun Wukong, meaning something like monkey awakened from emptiness. He stole the Rui Jingu Bang from the Dragon King's undersea palace, a staff so heavy it had been used to calibrate the depths of oceans, and he carried it like it weighed nothing at all. He consumed the immortal peaches of the Jade Empress's garden. He swallowed the alchemical pills of the Taoist patriarch Laozi as if they were snacks. He defeated the entire celestial army, 100,000 soldiers, more or less by himself, because the celestial army had never encountered anything quite like him. He declared himself the great sage equal to heaven, a title the Jade Emperor did not want to give, and eventually gave anyway because the alternative was continued catastrophe. He crashed through heaven with the ease of someone who had never been taught that heaven was supposed to be frightening. The Buddha eventually stopped him, not through force exactly, but through a wager. "Show me you can escape the palm of my hand," Wukong was told. "And if you can, heaven is yours." He leapt to the edge of the universe and carved his name on what he believed were 5 great pillars at the world's boundary, only to return and find that the pillars were the Buddha's fingers. He had never left the palm. He was sealed beneath 5 Elements Mountain for 500 years. When a Tang dynasty monk, named Xuanzang, called the Tang monk in the text, came to retrieve him as a guardian for a great westward pilgrimage to India to collect sacred Buddhist scriptures, Wukong agreed to serve him. He wore a golden headband that the Bodhisattva Guanyin placed on his head, a band that tightened in unbearable pain whenever the monk chanted a specific sutra designed as a leash. He protected the monk across deserts and demon kingdoms and mountain ranges. He fought monsters and negotiated with gods and transformed his body into 100 shapes. And gradually, through the long labor of the journey, learned something he had never needed before: how to serve something larger than himself without losing himself in the process. At the end of the journey, the Tang monk received the scriptures. All the travelers were rewarded. Sun Wukong was granted Buddhahood, the title Victorious Fighting Buddha, and the golden headband, Guanyin promised, would dissolve once enlightenment was achieved. In the original novel, this is where the story ends, more or less triumphantly. In Black Myth Wukong, this is where the tragedy begins. Game Science, the studio that built Black Myth Wukong over 6 years, made a precise and deliberate choice about where their story diverges from the source material. Their version of Wukong arrived at Buddhahood, received the title, and looked around at his new life in the celestial court, and understood something the ceremony had been designed to obscure. Nothing had changed. The headband was still there. He was still watched, still evaluated, still the unpredictable stone monkey whose raw power and independence made the celestial hierarchy deeply, fundamentally uncomfortable. The Buddhahood was real in the sense that the title was granted, but the freedom that was supposed to come with it had been quietly set aside. The fandom wiki for the game states it plainly. The court sent an army to destroy Mount Huaguo and massacre Wukong's kinsfolk in order to coerce him back to his heavenly position. That word, coerce, is doing a great deal of work there. Not invite, not negotiate. Kill his family until he complies. Wukong rose to meet the army. This is the prologue, and it is the most important thing to understand about the story, because the prologue is not quite what it first appears to be. The prologue of Black Myth Wukong shows Wukong moving through the celestial army like a force of nature. He fights. He holds. He is, by any honest measure, winning. The final opponent is Erlang Shen, the three-eyed warrior deity, nephew of the Jade Emperor, the one being in the celestial hierarchy who had historically been Wukong's true equal in combat. They fight with everything they have, and at the critical moment, the golden headband, the one that was supposedly dissolved by Buddhahood, the one that was never actually removed, tightens. Wukong is incapacitated. Erlang delivers the finishing blow. Wukong is sealed in stone on the summit of Mount Huaguo. Here is what the game eventually reveals, buried deep in its secret content. That fight was not simply a defeat. Erlang Shen is Wukong's sworn brother. He carries his own deep grievance against the Jade Emperor, who had imprisoned Erlang's mother for the crime of loving a mortal. The game's wiki confirms it directly. Erlang secretly and voluntarily helped Wukong achieve his total freedom, scheming alongside his lifelong rival against the celestial court itself. What looked like a celestial victory was, from another angle, the opening move of a plan. The plan was this: a mortal death was the only path to genuine freedom. The curse of the golden headband could not be removed from Wukong himself. But if his essence was separated, if his senses were fragmented from the stone that imprisoned them, then they could eventually be gathered by someone new. Someone who was not Sun Wukong, and therefore carried none of the history or the curse that bound him. The Wikipedia article on the game confirms this. Erlang Shen, who took the mind of Sun Wukong after their battle, later reveals that their fight allowed Wukong to set a path to break free through a mortal death. The fall was the beginning of the plan. When Wukong fell, he split himself, not in desperation, but in accordance with a Buddhist philosophical framework that game science wove into the very architecture of the game's 6 chapters. The framework comes from the concept of ayatana, the 6 sense bases that together constitute conscious experience: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and finally, the most complex and most essential, mind. Each of the 6 senses became a relic, 5 of them scattered into the world. The 6th, the mind, was held by Erlang. And then the waiting began. Understanding the relic system as more than a gameplay mechanic changes how the entire game feels. These are not collectibles. They are the fragmented pieces of a consciousness, each one carrying the quality of the sense it represents, distributed across a world that has been slowly unraveling in Wukong's absence. The first relic is Craving Eyes, the sense of sight. Chapter 1 takes place on Black Wind Mountain, and the Destined One finds the relic after confronting the Black Bear Guai, a creature who, in the original novel, had once stolen Xuanzang's cassock and crossed blades with Wukong. In the game's lore, the Black Bear Guai had been called to fight against Wukong in the final battle. For that service, he received the Eyes relic, and he has kept it enshrined in a pagoda on his mountain ever since. When the Destined One defeats him, the bear does not die in defiance. The wiki states he surrenders, recognizes something familiar in the figure before him, and allows the relic to go. The eyes that once saw all things, given freely in the end. There is something quietly beautiful about that. The second relic is Fuming Ears, the sense of hearing. Chapter 2 carries the Destined One across Yellow Wind Ridge, a land of howling storms and sand, and a demon called the Yellow Wind Sage, a creature of enormous power whose tragedy runs deeper than the surface battle suggests. His is a story about rage and grief and how the desire for power curdles even sympathetic origins. The Ears relic passes from his defeated form. The third relic is Hubris Nose, the sense of smell. Chapter 3 leads into the domain of Yellowbrow, one of the game's most fascinating antagonists, a self-styled Buddha who had imprisoned even the deity Maitreya inside a giant golden symbol. Yellowbrow's entire story is a dark mirror of the celestial hierarchy's own arrogance, a being who declared himself divine because he had the power to make others believe it, which, if you look clearly, is not entirely unlike what the actual celestial court does. When he falls, the Nose relic returns to the flow of consciousness being slowly rebuilt. The fourth relic is Envious Tongue, the sense of taste. Chapter 4 descends into the Webbed Hollow, a world of silk and shadow and spider demons, where the Destined One is accompanied by Zhu Baji, the former heavenly marshal Tian Peng, a wandering spirit carrying the weight of a love story that never concluded properly. The chapter's final boss is the 100-eyed Taoist master, a centipede-like demon who had also fought against Wukong in the final battle and received the Tongue relic as reward. He used it to devastating effect, taking vengeance on the beings who had once aided Wukong, including severing the hands of the Bodhisattva Pilanpo. When the Destined One defeats him amid the Webbed Hollow's grief-soaked history, the Tongue relic passes on. The fifth relic is Grieved Body, the sense of touch. Chapter 5 arrives at the Flaming Mountains, and with it one of the most emotionally dense storylines in the game. The Bull King, once Wukong's sworn brother, and his son Red Boy. The wiki notes that the Bull King participated in the final battle reluctantly, pressured by familial obligation rather than genuine loyalty to the celestial cause. The Grieved Body relic is entangled with this tragedy. Red Boy intercepts it, consumes it, and must be defeated before it can be reclaimed. When Rakshasi, Red Boy's mother, pleads for mercy and offers her plantain fan, Red Boy refuses to submit and takes his own life, which causes the relic to re-emerge. The grief threaded through Chapter 5, of loyalty ground down by circumstance, of family bonds stretched to their breaking point, makes the relic's name feel like the summary of everything that happened to obtain it. 5 senses, 5 relics, 5 long roads through a world still bearing the wounds of Wukong's absence. And then there is the 6th. This is the moment the entire game has been building toward. And it arrives not in a scene of fire and thunder, but in a quiet conversation on still water. In Chapter 6, on Mount Huaguo itself, the Destined One passes through a stone that serves as a threshold between the present and a realm shaped by Wukong's lingering memories. Waiting at the water's edge is the old monkey, a figure who has appeared at key moments throughout the journey, gentle and slow-moving, wrapped in something that looks almost like the robes of a celestial being, with a quality of sadness so old it has become acceptance. He ferries the Destined One across, and partway across the water, something extraordinary happens. The Destined One and Zhu Bajie encounter reflections of their present selves in the still surface below. The sight of these reflections prompts the old monkey to speak. According to the Wikipedia article on the game, the old monkey reveals that the Destined One is the mind of Sun Wukong. He explains that Wukong's mind is not destroyed, it is simply gone in the way that all minds eventually go, because the mind is an essence unique to every life and is destined to fade away at life's end. Wukong can never return as he was. The mind that was his cannot be preserved or reconstructed. It lived its life and moved on. But the old monkey says the universe will always bear him a successor. And that successor, a new mind shaped by the same essential nature, carrying the same refusal to submit and the same instinct toward justice, is the Destined One. What does this mean exactly? Drawing on the Buddhist philosophy the game integrates so carefully, the mind in this framework is not a substance that migrates unchanged from life to life. It is more like a pattern that recurs, a flame passed from one candle to another. The new flame is not the old one, but they share the same essential nature, and without the old one, the new one would not exist. The Destined One is not Sun Wukong reincarnated in the way a soul might transfer simply from one body to another. He is something more precise than that, the continuation of a particular kind of consciousness. The same essential being, new life, without the old life's memories. This reframes the entire journey. You were never gathering pieces of someone else. Each time you recovered a relic, you were absorbing parts of your own nature back into yourself. The eyes that see clearly, the ears that hear truth, the nose that follows instinct, the tongue that chooses its words, the body that endures. These were never foreign attributes. They were always yours. The journey was the process of remembering what you already were. And the mind, the 6th and final relic, was never missing. It was you. Before the final confrontation with Wukong's broken shell, the game offers the Destined One a path that most players on their first run will never find. It requires completing hidden quests scattered across each of the 5 previous chapters, acts of attention and exploration that feel like a monk performing quiet, prescribed rituals, each one unlocking a sliver of something larger. If all of them are completed, a new road opens. Maitreya, the future Buddha, released from Yellowbrow's symbol, guides Erlang Shen and the Destined One to a place called Mount Mei. There, a secret boss fight unfolds. You fight Erlang Shen, the deity who secretly helped Wukong plan everything. The being who has held the mind relic, stored in his third eye, since the day of the final battle, waiting for the right successor. The fight is not an act of hatred. Read carefully. In context, it is closer to a final trial. The last and most demanding test before the inheritance is transferred. When Erlang falls, he opens his third eye and releases the memories stored there. Sun Wukong's memories, the experiences and knowledge belonging to the old mind. The Wikipedia summary of the game confirms his realization, spoken aloud to the Destined One. Their battle all those years ago allowed Wukong to set a path to break free through a mortal death. The defeat was always the beginning of the plan. Now, carrying those memories, the Destined One faces Wukong's shell, the broken, senseless, instinct-driven husk left behind when everything else departed. The Wikipedia article describes it precisely. It is Sun Wukong's broken, senseless, instinct-driven corpse, the final boss of Chapter 6. It is not Wukong. It is the physical remains of a being whose mind and senses have long since moved on. Defeating it is not triumph over the Monkey King. It is the last act of mercy the Destined One can offer to what remains. The 5 relics unite with the Destined One. The shell dissolves. The golden circlet materializes in the shallow water. 2 choices, 2 futures. In the normal ending, the old monkey lifts the circlet from the water and places it on the Destined One's head. The cage returns to the mind of the Monkey King. A new vessel, the same bind. The cycle closes. Whether the old monkey does this by design or by sorrow is one of the game's most quietly contested questions. The look on his face, if you watch it carefully, is not triumphant. It carries the weight of an obligation too long held, the expression of someone completing something they are not entirely certain is right. This could imply that he serves a power larger than himself, one that has always required the Monkey King to remain leashed. Or it might suggest he genuinely believes the headband is protective rather than restrictive, a misguided kindness rather than a calculated act of control. The game does not resolve the distinction, and the ambiguity feels purposeful rather than unfinished. The true ending plays out differently. With Erlang's memories received, with full knowledge of what the circlet represents, what it cost Wukong, and what Wukong sacrificed to create the possibility of genuine freedom, the Destined One does not accept it. The circlet stays in the water. The Destined One rises without it. And for the outside, first time in the story of the Monkey King, across all the ages and battles and cycles of imprisonment and escape, the mind of Sun Wukong is free. Not free because the cage broke. Free because the new mind was never sealed inside it. Free because the Destined One walked far enough, carried enough, and understood enough to simply leave the last piece of the old captivity where it lay. The game's title for this mode, Enter a New Cycle, takes on a different meaning after the true ending. The series is called Black Myth, and game science has indicated future installments are planned. The freed Destined One steps into something that has not yet been named. Where he goes, what the Celestial Court does in response, whether Erlang Shen's rebellion has consequences that reach forward. These are questions deliberately left open, threads pointing toward a larger story still being assembled. One of the most beautiful and often underappreciated elements of Black Myth Wukong is its animated chapter cutscenes. Each of the 6 chapters concludes with one, rendered in a distinct artistic style, and together they form a secondary narrative running quietly alongside the gameplay, a series of philosophical meditations on what the chapter's events actually mean at a deeper level. The Wikipedia article notes that the first 3 cutscenes are grounded in Chinese philosophy. The 4th addresses love, the 5th addresses grief and anger, mapping precisely onto the Bull King's story in the Flaming Mountains, the tragedy of Red Boy and Rakshasi, a family whose bonds were stretched past endurance by political obligation and pride. The sixth cutscene is a reverse chronological flashback to key events from Journey to the West itself, ending, and this detail is worth sitting with Wukong offering a toast to his companions before the celestial army arrives. That final image, Wukong raising a cup to the friends who walked the long road with him, knowing what is coming. Choosing celebration anyway, it recontextualizes the prologue completely. He was not simply angry when he fought the celestial army, he was full. He had come home from one of the greatest journeys any being had ever undertaken, and he had been happy, briefly and genuinely happy, and he raised a cup to the ones he loved before the army came to take that happiness away. The fact that his plan eventually succeeded, that the defeat was always the beginning of liberation, does not make that image less devastating. It makes it somehow more so. There is something that has been running through this entire story like a quiet current, and it is worth sitting with before we reach the end. The Destined One never speaks. In a game built on a source novel famous for its endlessly talking, arguing, scheming, philosophizing protagonist, a character whose voice and personality fill every chapter of Journey to the West with noise and color and life, the young monkey at the center of black myth, Wukong makes no sound except in combat. He grunts, he lands, he breathes, but he does not speak. Zhu Bajie notices immediately. He calls the Destined One another mute, a line that hits differently once you understand what it implies. All the previous Destined Ones were the same. Every monkey sent out before this one, every attempt that failed, was mute. The silence is not a trait of this particular protagonist. It is a pattern across every candidate. The game's lore, understood through its Buddhist framework, offers one reading. The mind is not yet fully formed. The Destined One carries the essential nature of Wukong's consciousness, but not yet the memories, not yet the layered experience that gives consciousness a voice and a self. A mind without memories is not empty. It has personality, instinct, drive, care. But it does not yet have words for what it is. He is Wukong's mind before it has learned to speak again. Here is where this becomes something more than sad. After completing the game 3 full times with the true ending, 3 full cycles, each one accumulating more of Wukong's presence, each relic perk unlocked, all 6 aspects of the Monkey King's consciousness fully integrated, the protagonist begins to speak. Not in cutscenes, but in combat, with the quips and confident asides of the Monkey King himself. The Monkey King's stance unlocks for permanent use. The full power and the full voice finally present in NG+4. 3 full journeys to arrive at 1 voice. 3 cycles of becoming before the becoming is complete. Whether this emerges as gameplay design, lore, or both simultaneously, the effect is identical. A system where the game's mechanical structure and its thematic depth reinforce each other all the way down to the deepest layers of New Game Plus. The Destined One was always becoming. The silence was not absence, it was preparation. Of all the mysteries in Black Myth, Wukong, the old monkey is the one the game guards most carefully. He appears at key moments. He ferries the Destined One across the water in Chapter 6. He places the headband in the normal ending, or watches it remain in the water in the true ending. He is gentle and slow-moving, wrapped in something that looks almost like the robes of a celestial being, carrying a sorrow so old it has calcified into acceptance. The game presents 4 theories about who he might be, offered through collectible descriptions and environmental hints. And then, with what feels like entirely deliberate restraint, confirms none of them. One reading circulating widely in the community holds that he could be an agent of celestial power, placed to ensure the cycle continues, that each new Destined One ends up sealed again, that the freedom Wukong sought through sacrifice is always intercepted at the last moment. His visible reluctance when placing the headband in the normal ending lends some weight to this reading. There is grief in what he does, which is not what you would expect from a simple mechanism of control with no emotional investment. Another reading suggests he might be Xuanzang, the Tang monk, the pilgrim whom Wukong escorted across the world, living now in obscurity, present at the end of this new story, as he was present at the beginning of Wukong's transformation. The conspicuous absence of Xuanzang from the main events of the game could, along these lines, point toward him hiding in plain sight, watching the conclusion of something he helped set in motion. A third reading, perhaps the one that fits most elegantly with the game's overall philosophy, holds that the old monkey represents Wukong's Buddhahood, the enlightened state that was genuinely earned through the long pilgrimage, and then set aside when Wukong returned to Huaguo. Not a separate person, exactly, but an aspect of Wukong that separated from the rest when the stone closed, and has waited ever since, watching, witnessing, performing the last duties of a divided self. Game Science's CEO Feng Ji has described the studio's approach to sharing Chinese mythology with global audiences as a kind of careful gift-giving, offering something precious without forcing the recipient to receive it in any particular way. That philosophy fits exactly what the old monkey's ambiguity does for the story. The mystery is not a gap waiting to be filled. It is part of what the story is. A mind looking at its own ancient past self and not quite recognizing what it sees. That might be the most honest description of what that boat ride across the still water actually represents. Black Myth Wukong was released on August 20th, 2024, developed over 6 years, and sold 20 million copies in its first month, making it one of the fastest-selling single-player games ever released. It came from a studio that had previously made mobile titles, in a country whose gaming industry had long been dominated by multiplayer, online experiences. The scale of what they built, and the speed with which global audiences found it, suggests that the story they chose to tell landed somewhere real. Game Science spent years traveling across China to scan real temples and mountain ranges and ancient carvings, building the game's environments out of physical, living cultural history. The Kaiyuan Temple in Quanzhou, the Wulong Temple in Langzhong, the Dazu Rock carvings, places that carry centuries of accumulated meaning, rendered in real-time graphics so detailed they are sometimes difficult to distinguish from photography. The Yaoguai who inhabit these spaces are not arbitrary monsters from a generic fantasy palette. They are beings from a mythology that has shaped Chinese culture for 500 years, given their full complexity, their grudges and their grief, and their unexpected moments of grace. The Black Bear Guai, who surrenders when he sees something familiar in the young monkey standing before him. The Bull King, who never truly wanted to betray his sworn brother, but was placed in an impossible position. The hundred-eyed Taoist master, whose viciousness is inseparable from the vengeance he was carrying long before the Destined One arrived. The Yellowbrow, whose entire arc mirrors the very celestial arrogance he openly mocks. These are not obstacles. Most of them are victims of the same system that imprisoned and killed Wukong. The game quietly, persistently asks you to hold that truth as you fight them. What Game Science put at the center of all this craft is a question. Can freedom be inherited? Can the thing that was taken from one being be genuinely restored to the next? Can a mind carry forward the nature of the one who came before without also carrying forward the cage that was built for them? The answer the game arrives at, through 2 endings and dozens of hours of movement through a stunning and sorrowful world is yes, but only if the new mind is willing to leave the cage in the water when it is finally offered. Only if the cycle is recognized as a cycle. Only if the Destined One understands at the last possible moment that he does not owe this system anything. Let me take you back to the very beginning one more time. Not to the stone on the mountain, and not to the prologue battle, but to the first moment after you take control. The Destined One, somewhere at the edge of Black Wind Mountain, staff in hand, stepping into the fog. You did not know, in that moment, what you were. The game gave you a mission: recover the relics, revive the king, and it let you believe that mission was about someone else, someone greater than you, someone you were merely serving. Every NPC who looked at you and said quietly, "So similar, so very similar," was not describing a copy. They were describing recognition, the way someone who loved the original might see in a younger face the same essential quality that made the original irreplaceable. Not the memories, not the history, the nature, the entire structure of the game, understood this way, was always a portrait of a new mind discovering what it already is. You were never incomplete because you lacked someone else's power. You were in the middle of becoming what you already fundamentally were, gathering back the senses scattered not from some external source, but from your own original self. The relics were not Sun Wukong's gifts to you. They were yours from the moment the world made you. The journey was the proof, and the headband waiting in the water at the end was not an inheritance. It was the last remaining mechanism of a system that needed you to believe you owed it something. To the court, to the cycle, to the idea that someone like the Monkey King could only exist inside a framework of permission and control. The Destined One who leaves it in the water is not refusing an inheritance. He is refusing a debt that was never legitimately his to begin with. That is the story of Wukong. A story that was never really about resurrection. It was always about a young monkey learning, through every boss and every relic and every quiet road through ancient mountains, that he was not, and had never been, less than the legend everyone else was trying to rebuild. He was the legend. He just needed the journey to remember it. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me, and letting this story drift through you in the dark. If you would like to keep exploring these worlds together, the lore, the legends, the secrets that live inside the games we love, a gentle tap on the like button and a soft click on subscribe means everything to this little channel. There are more stories waiting. I will see you in the next one. Rest well.